Hello and welcome to an episode of the Manufacturing Leaders Podcast with me, Mark Bracknell, Managing Director of Theo James Recruitment. Today, we welcomed on David Yodaiken, the CEO of Cyclops Electronics. This was a fascinating episode where we really sort of dug into David's journey, someone who was born into his family's business. It was his dad's business. Started out cleaning the floors at age 14, essentially went away for a lot of years to learn his trade in a different business environment, went down the university route, went down the practical route, on the understanding for him to come back and use all the lessons that he's learned to then become CEO of the business. And I absolutely loved all the lessons and takeaways that we discussed. One thing you'll take away from this is talking about how they become a business which keeps people employed there for so long. People have been there for decades, and he puts that down to communication, how you communicate with your staff on a daily basis and how you communicate the vision on a daily basis. And this was a real key takeaway along many other leadership lessons and journeys we discuss along the way. So look, you're going to really enjoy this episode with David. So please feel free to grab a coffee, watch, listen, whatever you prefer to do. Please do the greatest honor of just clicking that like and subscribe and commenting and help me grow on the show and get more guests, great guests like David. So thank you very much. Hope you enjoy the episode. Excellent. A massive welcome today to David Yodaiken, the CEO of Cyclops Electronics. How are you, David? You all right?
Yeah, very well today. Thanks. How are you doing?
Yeah, really good after a nice bank holiday weekend. So yes, looking forward to this episode, which obviously we'll dig into everything about Cyclops, your journey. But the first question is the same question I ask everyone, which is, what does it mean to you to be a leader?
It's a great question. So, to me, being a leader in today's workplace is about, it's a combination of being inspiring, being respectful, and really being the person that people can trust and trust in yourself. And if you don't have that, I feel fundamentally you can't lead. You need to trust you're on the right journey, trust you're on the right path, and that message needs to go all the way through every facet of your business. And so for me, it starts with trust, it starts with respect, it starts with inspiring leadership.
I like that. I like that word trust, I guess, because like I say, you mentioned it's both ways. You know, they need to trust you, but actually that trust in yourself part, that's interesting, isn't it? Because that's often, you often lead with phrases or suggestions or say orders, but sometimes you don't necessarily, you're there yet, trust your advice. Is that something you have had to work on to lead, to really sort of trust yourself? That makes sense.
Yeah, I think sometimes you and potentially your leadership team or your board can set, where you think you're going. And over time, I've learned you have to trust in yourself that the path that you are setting out is the right path. You're setting your stall out for the year, the next 2 to 3 year period, for example. And you need to trust that vision, that journey, and then trust that you can deliver that message through your business and also externally. It's one thing getting your staff on board. You then have to learn how to communicate that message. But that word trust for me is really fundamental. Think as well, something really key is about communication in trust. I think it's often a little bit overlooked, the importance of almost over communicating until it's just a baseline in your business that people know exactly what's going on, where you're going, and the journey.
Yeah, it's such a hard balance, that, isn't it? Trying to get people the right enough information, but like you say, sometimes you can overshare, which can lead to further questioning and further anxiety. It's just and this is why management is so hard, isn't it? Because it's so multifaceted.
Yeah. And especially now, you're looking at changes in generational workforces. You're talking about having up to 5 generations in a workforce. People used to working this way all the way through people used to working this way. The expectations are so different. And how do you navigate that as a leader? You've got to have some sort of guiding principles.
Yeah, 100%. But I think what I've seen is a real shift towards a change in leadership and management over the last 10 years, really, I would say, in particular. And, I guess it gets back to that trusting, doesn't it? And trusting yourself, but actually being okay with making mistakes as well. That's something that I struggled with when I first started out, I guess, really kicking myself to make mistakes. But I think people respect you for holding your hands up sometimes, don't they?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. If your people can trust you'll be honest with them, then they feel better empowered to be honest with you. And I think we all need to get really comfortable in business that mistakes happen. It's kind of how you deal with it, how you solve problems that reflects on that next step after that. And that's the same with customers, the same with staff. It's kind of the same with everything. And again, you just build up those foundations of trusts with your teams, and that communication piece is part of that, and the honesty piece is fundamental.
Yeah, 100%. Cyclops Electronics. For those who don't know about the business, David, can you give us just a very brief sort of summary of what you do, where you're based, that type of thing?
Yeah, so Cyclops Electronics is the core business of the Cyclops Group. We are an electronic component distributor. We are one of the larger electronic component distributors in the UK and certainly Europe. I'll just correct that, one of the largest independently owned and family run ones anyway. The business was started by my father in 1990, so it was only a couple of years before I was born. And it's the traditional entrepreneurial story, started in his bedroom. Before the days of the internet, before the days of the yellow pages. It was found a military base in need of a part, and then knew someone in Europe who had the component he was looking for, and then this kind of revolution of, okay, I think this is a business here, let's get going with it type of thing. And started with parcels in the bedroom, and now we have a team globally of around 100 people, head office in York with about 60 odd staff, and about 5 different divisions doing slightly different things, all within the electronics space.
Brilliant. I love hearing those entrepreneur stories of, like you say, people who just took a risk and just backed themselves, trust themselves to have a go and see what happens. That you mentioned that word entrepreneur there, and obviously that entrepreneurial spirit, that he obviously saw a niche or saw a gap in the market, went for it. This is a family business, and you're, I guess, born into a family business, but it's still your choice to go down that path or not. How similar do you think you are to your dad with that entrepreneurial piece, or do you have a different skill set, so to speak? Because it's quite subjective, that entrepreneurial piece, isn't it?
Yeah, so I would say I'm probably a little bit more. I've had a bit more of the kind of traditional education piece, I suppose. Went off to uni. My father basically did a college course in business, and then he kind of went off from there. No university in my family otherwise. And I kind of went the other route, went off to uni, did undergrad, then did a postgrad at the business school at the University of Leeds, and then I've gone on to do an MBA. So I've gone down a little bit more of that traditionalist, now maybe what's traditionalist, route of education as well. And then for me, I've always really enjoyed working in the family business from a sense of kind of wider experience, but then thought, well, what else could I do to kind of widen that knowledge for myself personally, and kind of really feel like I could get to know and understand partly myself. I think to be able to trust yourself to do a good job, for me, a part of learning to trust myself was about going off and getting other experience. And I think with that foundation of other experience, I've been able to bring that back to my family business and have a much more centered approach that allows me to add value in the way I trust myself to do.
And I love that, because I don't imagine you had to do that on paper. A lot of people have gone, great, this is going to be a business I'll be involved in. Can't really put a foot wrong. But you didn't. You decided to have a taste of it initially when you were young, so you understood the basis of it, which I'm right in saying that was the proper basics, starting from the scratch, was it, by all intents and purposes?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I started off when I was 14, sweeping the warehouse floor. And at the time, we had a big warehouse down in Full Sutton, which is kind of down past York. And it was a case of sweep the floors, keep the parts clean, count the parts, book them in, learn how to quality control, and really kind of doing all those kind of more basic jobs that lead to the kind of fundamental thing of, we've got some parts here we can sell. And then all the way through kind of my summers, and then sort of growing up, I did slightly different jobs in different areas, all the way through to kind of ops and marketing and sales, which kind of, I suppose, gave me a really good understanding of what it actually takes to do that job, and that job. And then, I suppose I got to a point where I went off to university and kind of went, actually, I think, I've learned a bit of that in theory, but what does it actually mean in practice? And so I had a bit of that entrepreneurial spirit. It's I had a go starting a couple of businesses, one or two, and then I kind of went, actually, I want that experience from a larger organisation.
Yeah.
So, sorry.
No, I was going to say, well, was the plan all, I guess 14, 15 years old, most people that I don't necessarily know what they want to do. I guess it's slightly different if there's a potential path for you there. But when you were sweeping the floors and look at the machine, were you thinking, right, this is me, X amount? Or can you remember what the mindset was at the time? Because it's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I probably didn't have the best mindset as a 14, 15-year-old boy. I kind of thought, I don't really know why I'm doing this. This
Yeah.
could, which could be anyone. But, it's a summer job, I'll do it type of thing. And it's funny, as I think the years went by and I went, right, I did that job for a year or two or a couple of summers or whatever it was, and then I've done that job. I kind of reflect to go, oh, well, I know how that works because I've done that. Oh, I know how that works. I've done that. And kind of, it wasn't probably until I got to uni and started talking about theories of things. And I went, no, I'm not sure about that in practice.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't a lot of people who had that kind of experience, at that kind of relatively young age, because lots of people, that go to school, college, university, and then, haven't had a great experience of kind of the real world of work, and especially in a kind of technical environment.
Yeah. 100%.
So I think, my journey of kind of understanding the value of that really, I didn't understand the value of it until a bit later.
Which I think is an interesting point, actually, because if you look at any academic route, its practical element is minimal because it is academia. It's classroom based, and I think that's often a criticism, I guess, for people coming straight from the academic route straight into, let's say, a leadership position or manufacturing environment. It's also a criticism for even modern day apprenticeships, which don't necessarily have as much practical sort of training as they could be. Is that something, do you think, that as an industry we need to fix? Because what you're saying there is you had a much better experience for university because you had that practical grounding to understand the theory, because the theory, if not, it's just theory and you can't put it into practice, because you've as you got both experiences. What are your thoughts on that, and could we change that potentially, you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% think this is a problem. I mean, it's one thing going through a classroom and then kind of being examined on something you've learned in a classroom, but why in every module, with how flexibly we can learn now, is there not a placement in some sort of business for one day where you can actually apply something you've learned, and I don't know the actual practical implications of this, don't get me wrong, but I think there's a little bit of a gap there between the fundamental knowledge of experience and then kind of all this kind of theoretical learning. And I think together they're really powerful, but kind of without one, you're kind of missing a piece. It's kind of like you need this arm and this arm, but and it is fundamental in my opinion.
And we're probably similar age, and I can't remember being in school ever being anyone speaking to me about manufacturing engineering. I can't really. You know what I mean? It was the academic subjects, how you pass exams. That was it. Even careers advice, which I went on to be a careers advisor. There was nothing really regarding that manufacturing piece. It's just unheard of. I kind of hope and think that might change now because of the way skill sets are changing. You look at automation engineers and the fact that links in more now with more the science side to it and the IT side to it. So I think that might change, but I think it's been a gap for way too long, which is why we are where we are, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I was trying to have a bit of a look into this and a bit of a Google, looking at even things like the news, and a lot of there's been a bigger push on things like software and hardware and stuff like that, but not really on manufacturing and engineering excellence. I think there's a lack of understanding, especially for young people, on the variety of careers, products. Even getting excited about, we could build this here. We could make that. We don't have to buy it in from the Far East or whatever. We could actually build that here. That'd be pretty cool, wouldn't it? And as an individual in this country, you could go from being in school, seeing something really cool or a great opportunity, and go, let's design it, let's build it, let's sell it, let's market it, let's do the whole process here. And I think we need to work on that as a nation.
Yeah, I completely agree. So fast forward, I guess, when you've taken yourself for university, like you say, you tried setting up your own businesses, and was that with the hope to get experience, or was that to hope to actually run some successful business of your own then?
To be fair, I didn't really know where it would take me. So my first venture was actually a thing called University, YOU University, and it was about when I went to uni, bought a load of stuff I didn't need, pots, pans, bedding, blah blah blah, this, that, the other. Kind of went, well, that was a silly waste of money when I'm a student. So I kind of started this thing with the tagline, for students by students, and it was, we'll sell you a pack of everything you need. We'll leave it on your bed for day one when you arrive. It saves the whole aggravated argument with your parents when they drop you off.
Yeah, I remember that.
It's value for money. You're not buying stuff you don't need. And we'd leave a little funny thing, packets of Haribo and little packs of things and stuff for people to kind of give them a bit of a happier feeling for a send off. And I think the whole unique selling point was, it was with students, we know what you need when you go to university. And then I graduated and went, I've kind of just killed off my idea because I'm not at uni anymore.
But great idea though, and that's entrepreneurial spirit. Again, you've seen a problem, you tried to fix it. What have you? I guess the business you've had. What did you learn from them, do you think?
I suppose it's the roundedness. It's I think you can go and do a job, right, and you think a business, yeah, I can get sales, no problem. But then it's everything that goes on behind the scenes in the back end, managing your supply chain and finances and a bank account and legal things and contracts. And it's that rounded nature of what running a business actually is. And again, it's not something that is educated, it's not something that's taught. It's a real gap, I believe. And it's something that you can have a great idea, you can be a bit of an entrepreneur or a great engineer and either discover or build something, but it's how do you make that into something that's commercially valid as a business, as a unit, as and then go on to sell it and make money. And I think there's a real gap for that middle piece of, got a great idea, how do you commercialize it?
Yeah, 100%. Again, it's right back to education piece, isn't it? We're not teaching people to be entrepreneurs unless you choose a business administration route, and often it's too late because you could attract people. I didn't see a first P&L until I started this business. I've been working for a long time, so it's a real issue. But I love the fact that you went out there and took those risks, knowing you'd get some either success or you learn something from it. Because actually, again, it's what is the risk, particularly when you're young. What's the risk? You know what I mean? The risk is you fail and you learn something. Simple as that, isn't it?
And I've got to say, I did. We went and advertised at a trade show in London, and it was kind of this studenty thing, people looking to get experience of, what it might be like at uni. And you'd have, the insurance people, Ensley, and kind of big student accommodation providers and that kind of thing. And they were like, "What's this guy doing here with this pack?" Kind of thing. And I went, and it was an absolute disaster. We forgot this, we forgot that. I hadn't paid for parking.
Yeah.
Tickets were on the wrong day. It was that kind of thing of, blooming heck, how many companies go to these shows? Even stuff like that just blows your mind, But again, without doing it, because you're not taught about it, you don't get the lessons. And that's kind of the key point there of, that's what that gave me. That experience gives you the foundation to know, right, well, when I do that again, I know what I need.
Yeah, 100%. It's like anything, isn't it? If you're running an event, it's not the event, it's the logistics behind it, it's the planning, it's the parking, it's the timing, isn't it? It's everything. There's so much to things like that, to anything, but it's that lesson, isn't it? The learning curve.
Absolutely, yeah.
Then I guess stepping foot back in the business, where obviously a business your dad owned, that's a big responsibility. Was it always the case that you would lead that at some point, or?
So I think there was a couple of crux, points where there was a few crossroads. I went off to get some experience in engineering for a large automobile company. Then I went off and got some experience in the agricultural industry, got some technical knowledge. And I think I honestly didn't feel I had the experience before that to be able to step up to a leadership position. I know a few people in family businesses who kind of have just kind of fallen into it and done it without really the wider experience. And to be honest, I didn't have the confidence for that. So it was, I suppose, a mixture of my own confidence and the right time for the business. The business was at a mature point where, we could work out having two directors, if you like, or senior directors, and kind of, you have this patch, I'll have this patch, and how do we actually work together? I think some people think family run, there's, father and son there who work very similarly. Actually, we couldn't be anything more, unlike.
So you're playing to your strengths, though, there, aren't you? That is, but I guess to play to your strengths, you got to understand what they are in the first place, haven't you?
Yeah, and that's been a journey. I would say that's probably been the hardest part of the journey. You know, there's never been another director or employee that my dad's taken on like me, but at the same time, I've never worked for a boss that has been my father. So you know, there's the whole father-son dynamic relationship at play there. There's the kind of workplace dynamics. There's you know, the dynamics with the rest of the leadership team, and those are all really big considerations, and they've had to be there's been challenges, but we just have tried to tackle them all head on and work out kind of, right, well, my view's this, your view's this. How do we actually meet in the middle?
Apologies for interrupting this episode with a very quick announcement about my business. Theo James are a specialist talent provider specifically to the manufacturing and engineering sector. I'm incredibly proud of what we've achieved since our inception in 2015. We specialize in roles from semi-skilled trades right the way up to our TJ exec search arm of the business, both on the contract and permanent side. We offer both bespoke one-off campaigns for hard-to-fill roles or a full partnership service where we become an extension of your business. For any information, please get in touch with me or the team. I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. Thank you. Yeah. Whenever you go into a business or start in a business in a new role, irrespective if it's a family-run business or not, part of your role will be, I imagine, to understand what the culture is and understand if you need to take that culture in a slightly different direction to fall under your leadership. What's that journey been like to be happy with the culture of the business the way you want it?
So Cyclops has been a bit of a funny one out with that, because there's been a lot of people there who've been with the company for between 15 and 30 years. So actually a lot of people who've probably seen me grow up and kind of work in those different areas. And I think I walked in quite senior, but with probably, I would say, a lot of the respect of a lot of those longer serving members of staff. And the second part of that is probably the communication piece. So I alluded at the start, you know, part of leadership is about the vision and the journey and the importance of trust and communication. So for me, that's been, how do I communicate to everybody effectively that this is the journey I want Cyclops Group to now go into? And that's about over communicating. That's about, this is how we've done it, you know, and that's worked great. But now we're of a size and a shape and a feel that actually this is 2025. We've got to work this way. So this is how we're going to do it. This is why. This is how. This is the milestones. And I think that's what it's come down to for me. It's that trust piece. It's leadership and setting those stalls out for good communication.
And that's really interesting. And you mentioned there as well the amount of people who've been there for a long, long time, which is probably quite rare now. You know, basically, you know, people move every 2 years, 5 years plus is considered, you know, a great record now. But obviously, you've done something there. You've got a business there with a culture and ethos which is different, and that doesn't happen by accident. You've obviously mentioned communication is key. How does that, you know, if you walked into a business where it was the opposite to that, you know, people were leaving every year, people were citing that communication was the biggest problem. How do you replicate what you've done there in a different business in terms of the day-to-day, you know, the meetings, the emails and so and so? Because sometimes people go, they're great communication, but why is that and how? That's what I'm interested in, if that's all right.
So I slightly controversially, I mean, I'd probably do nothing for the first, 30 days. It's really understanding. But post that, it's about breaking the wheel a little bit. It would be, you're in the middle of a meeting that's gone on too long, that you're not achieving anything. Guys, come on, that's enough. Stop. And people get into habits. People love habits. And that's the thing that you've got to change. That's the hardest thing to change, but it's the thing you've got to change. And when there isn't great communication, in my opinion, the best way to change that is to start breaking down some habits that have either crept in or organically been, created through culture. And so it's about breaking those habitual things that lead to the wrong outcomes in your business.
Like that. Is that, not saying bad behavior, but is that poor behavior for some businesses? Is that lazy, or is it just lack of productivity? Because sometimes those bad habits aren't because someone is a bad employee. Like you say, it's just something that's ingrained into them from previous management, from previous culture. I guess you look at manufacturing now, we're all trying to improve efficiencies and increase profit because things have got so tight. So I imagine in this type of industry, you've almost got to change what were good habits to even better habits now, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. That's totally correct. I mean, how much do we attribute laziness as like a purposeful character trait, right? Like, in my opinion, I think sometimes nobody does anything outwardly, purposefully, incorrectly or wrong, but behaviors and things creep in because of either mismanagement or miscommunication, and that kind of sets then a new tone of what's normal and expected.
Yeah. Yeah. I think vision's an interesting one. I had someone on here once was talking about vision and where your business is going. And they sort of challenged me and said, how strong is your vision? I said, pretty strong, I think. We talk about it a lot. And then he said, if I went in that room and I got everyone to write down exactly what the vision is, word for word, would they do it? And I was like, that's a good point. Not sure everyone would. And he got me on a trail of, okay, doing some work behind it. Same question to you. What would that be like in your organization, you think?
I think if I looked at where we were 2 years ago, I think you would walk into a room with, let's say, 10 people are in it, you'd probably get 9 different answers. But from where we are today, I think if I was going to rate us out of 10 on it, I would probably say we were 7 or 8.
Okay.
So, we still have some work to do. And I don't know whether that's down to my opinion about the over communication piece. What you want to do is you want to be the story writer of your business. As the leader, as a senior operator, you want to be the one who tells that story. What you don't want is there to be rumor, conjecture, uncertainty. Oh, we're trying to get to this number. I thought our target was this number. Oh, we've bought that business. Why have we done that? Oh, why are we looking at that software? Don't know. No idea. And oh, who's that? Oh, they're a new starter. Oh, that's great. Nobody told me. It's all those kind of questions and conversations that you absolutely don't want, because then you're not telling the story. You need to be the one who's going, so and so started this week, here we are against our targets, here's what it looks like year 1, year 2, year 3, and these are all the reasons why we're doing it. And I think that's the message I would always try and reinforce, is that almost over communication piece for the vision. And yeah, I preach, but I'd say we've got a little bit of more work to do on it.
No, I like that. It's good. That's really good advice. In a town hall environment, in a sort of roundup, what do you think works most effectively within a manufacturing environment? Would you say?
I think it's about openness to get feedback. So I think trying to create an environment, especially in manufacturing, where sometimes there can be almost kind of that us and them, and especially between almost like your shop floor and upstairs, or office and non-office. What you want to do is kind of break down some of those barriers. So, for example, we do an anonymous survey monthly that the SLT have to stand up and answer the same question to all staff. So we make sure that those questions are anonymous. We offer the opportunity for feedback, and we give the same answer to everyone. So that starts to encourage that, no idea who asked that question, but great question. Thanks for this. This is great because I can actually now explain it to everyone in the business. And it's anything you can do to break down some of those barriers so that people feel like they can actually ask the right questions. They go, oh, I don't understand why we're now doing this process. And you get to go, actually, we're doing it because of this. And they go, oh, okay, well, fine. But, now I know.
Like that.
Yeah.
You've obviously, what I really like, you've sharpened your skills as a leader through the experience you've got. And I think that's great. And I think that in itself is a lesson for people that sometimes you have to take yourself outside of your comfort zone. And that doesn't necessarily mean you go and start different businesses, but it might mean taking yourself out of something which feels comfortable. Out of all the years now that you've been a leader, how do you think you have changed over time? You think if you sort of video you leading, when you first started out to where you are now, what's been the biggest change, you think?
Probably being reflective. I wouldn't have ever called myself an arrogant individual, but I would say that, did I have a course of action and a plan of where I wanted to go and bulldoze a little bit? Maybe a little bit, yeah. Whereas now when I'm doing that kind of almost the vision piece of, right, what does the next 6 months look like? What does the next year look like? I've learned to be a little bit more reflective and go, well, I tried this last year. This didn't go well because of X, or when this last happened, this is how I should have done it better. And it's that kind of continual learning piece of, right, well, how can I make that better? So I'd say that's been probably the biggest change.
And how do you do that? Someone who is running a busy business, as a father, all the business of where do we find the time? How do you, is that just a take yourself out, reflect? Is it a write things down? What works for you, do you think?
I actually think having a little girl really helped me with that, because there were certain things I assumed about being a dad, and then you kind of in it, you're like, oh, okay, I need to maybe think about how I'm going to do that tomorrow, And I kind of thought, well, if that applies at home, why doesn't it apply at work? And I think part of it is, as I've gotten a little bit older, it's a bit easier to think about how your day's gone and gone, you know what, I probably should have done that this way, or next time I'd like to try that. So I think there's partly a piece on learning and age, but partly a piece of just kind of taking some time and, using the time to think.
You're absolutely right as well. There is no tougher leadership than parenting. It's the hardest piece, isn't it? Because they are non-stop. Even from a very early age, negotiating some way where that's crying, still the degree of the consequence of not giving what they want is crying. But it does make you immediately reflect on you as a human, doesn't it, in terms of how you deal with situations and often stressful situations at periods of time when you are tired. So I agree. I think that is a real key transferability. If we look at now, this is for a lot of businesses the most challenging period they've gone through. Let's be honest, there's always been something for the last 5-6 years, but Brexit, COVID, war, all sorts, energy crisis. Now we've got issues with tariffs and all sorts of stuff. I think businesses are more resilient than ever because of that. However, it's still a challenging period of time. If we look at electronics in isolation, what's happening there? What trends and challenges are you seeing, would you say, today?
So it's a really great question. There are lots of cycles in electronics. There is lots of changes happening all the time, and those changes aren't just in relation to manufacturing in the Far East. People think a lot of electronics is all kind of in the Far East and Asia and India and those sorts of areas. And I think people don't realize there's a lot of chip designers, there's a lot of new startup companies that are opening all the time. You talk about kind of Cambridge and Oxford areas, but it's not even just there, it's up Newcastle way. There's a great company that I know up there who's doing incredible things with flexible printed circuit boards. There is stuff going on in the US, and there's so much opportunity for one. There's a lot of opportunity for new people coming into the industry. And even in a time where electronics is in probably a period of sort of contraction in some areas, I would say there are still loads of new opportunity, because people are still buying phones, they're buying washing machines, they're buying, everything you can think of that is electronic. It's big. You start putting it all together, and it's one of the biggest industries.
Do you think there's a missing opportunity in the UK then to capitalise on that? Because you're right. I think that is the misconception. It's all outside the UK when there isn't some great companies here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people also think it might just then be in the software side of designing, but actually there's a huge hardware element. And you know what? When you build something electronic, well, you need to put it in a box. You need to stand it up. Is it an electric charging point? Is it, a laptop? Is it a pat testing device? There's so many different facets of electronics that are both designed, built, and assembled and delivered all in the UK. And I think people miss out on the idea that those companies need marketing, they need finance, they need operations, they need supply chain, they need design, they need assembled, and I think there is a misconception about none of that being done here. I think there is a missing piece on how big that is here.
Yeah, and when you're talking about that as well, it for me goes right back again to school, doesn't it? Because same thing when people start here, we hire people who typically aren't from recruitment, aren't from industry. Different, we take a variety of different people. And I always ask them on their induction, what do you know about manufacturing? It's fine if it's a 1 out of 10, but what is it? And often it be low numbers. I say, right, okay. I say, how do you think that laptop was made? And they'll say, oh, I think it was probably made in a factory. So, okay, well, do you realize how many factories and how many, when you talk about every single part of it, if you take, and you can see that, they're interested, but it's new information, because you're right. I think that would have been a fascinating topic in schools to literally to understand everything that goes on, from the design of someone literally with a pen and paper to a CAD software. Also, everything that goes into something that we just take for granted every day. It's incredible. And this is why I love this industry. But it just feels so.
Underrepresented.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
It's interesting when I think about, when you think about product SKUs, right? You get people who sell T-shirts to pharmaceuticals to anything. In our stock in the UK, we have nearly 400,000 lines, so it's different SKUs of parts, and that doesn't even touch the sides. It's absolutely phenomenal. Like the scope of electronics in this country is insane.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree. I'll let you ask you on the scale, please, because I think, companies, I don't think we'll see companies grow to the same. Well, they haven't been growing the last 10 years, but I don't think if you look at manufacturing, I don't think growth headcount wise will be on the cards for that many businesses. It'll be a different sort of scale. It could be automation, but it'll be some form of improvement, be some form of expansions, if you like. How do you change as a business? You take a business like yours, which is culture is at its heart, people is right at its heart, and that communication piece. How do you keep that sort of the values you've got whilst you're trying to scale and often change an organization? What advice do
Yeah,
you have?
yeah, that's a great question as well. I think it's about sticking to those values. It's really important to not get lost in it. So, for example, you make an acquisition or you take on quite a large number of staff, you can't forget the importance of the communication piece, the understanding. We've diversified and grown quite a lot over the past couple of years. So we had to put in place a new induction process because people felt like they were such a small cog in what was turning out to be quite a large machine. We're still, relatively speaking, a small business. And I think people then thought, well, I don't know what any of those other people do. So what we did is we developed a new induction system. So for the first 2 or 3 weeks when people start, they get to see what every department and every division of the company do. And then when they come back at the end of those 2 or 3 weeks, they go, you know what, I totally understand it now. It's really helpful. And I think, again, you've got to adapt. When your business grows and develops, you've got to adapt how you do it so that it still runs effectively, but with those values at its core.
Excellent. I love that. Brilliant. I want to ask you three quick fire questions, which I used to do now, and sometimes I'm looking to bring it back. So you don't know about these. So there you go. The classic one. You've half answered it, but you've got to give me a different answer. What advice would you give yourself now, knowing what you do? So if you go back 20 years, what advice would you give yourself?
Slow down. You don't know everything, and learn from the ground up. There's so many different directions I could go with this, but it's about that balance between experience and academia. For me, you can learn it anyway, but try and be as rounded as you can with those. Don't over presume to know someone's job just because you've learned about it. So it's a learning piece, it's a reflection piece, slowing down and understanding that.
Next question. There's an obvious answer here that you might not be able to. I'm going to say you can't say him because then it'll give you an out. Who's the best leader you've ever had and why? You can't say your dad, so at least I've given you an out now.
Who's the best leader? There was a guy who I worked for in the large car company that I worked for in Cheshire, and he was a really, really good leader. The reason is because he saw the value in saying to an individual, this is what we're looking to complete as an objective. This is how I think we get there. This is how we use your skills to do that. Go and do it. And the piece for me about the difference really between him leading the department was he wasn't looking to micromanage every KPI, but he was going, this is what we're trying to achieve, and being really, really clear about it and going, let's see how we get there. But you manage that time, but this is what we're trying to do. So he was trying to encourage that kind of independentness of managing time, objectives, kind of everything about how you're working, but always brought it back to this is what we're trying to achieve. So for me, his leadership piece was inspiring isn't the right word, but so clear. I've never had that much clarity of we need to get here, we need to get here, we need to get here. Kind of work how you want to, but this is where we're getting to. And it was, I think, so right for the kind of almost the modern age of, At the time, I was learning a lot about engineering, and it was kind of that thing of he didn't even want to know how I was learning about it or what I was doing. I could be sat in one of the cars for all he cared, but it was, this is where we're trying to get to. Let's do it.
Which is again, he's obvious. He's been a big inspiration for you on that communication and values piece, and the vision piece, because that's obviously what we've been talking about. Interesting. A recommendation I'm always after, and anyone else listening, any books or audio books you've ever read or listened to which has helped?
There's been a couple. There's a really interesting one. I'm not sure I agree with all of his points, but Tim Ferriss, the 4 Hour Work Week. So I'm not one for absolutes, but something that book I took away from is the value of time. The value of time, I think, as you take on certain roles in your career, you become a parent. I'm proud to say I outsource my earning because I'm terrible at it. But
Yep.
it's about kind of how you value your time, how you value the bits that you can do. And something that it's taken me, I think, a long time to learn with the help of some of these books is that I can deliver value like this by doing these things, or I can deliver value like this by doing these things that I'm not great at. And for me, anyone who is trying to be reflective about themselves could do with having a long think and going, how can I deliver value best? I think it's really focusing on those.
Yeah, I read that book and I had the exact same realization. It actually challenged me because I think I was so caught up on trying to improve weaknesses. Do you know what I mean? This is a weakness I must improve. But actually, just sometimes you just have to find someone in your business that's good at your weaknesses and then lead to what you're good at. But it's a nice realization, isn't it? You don't have to be good at everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, focus on your strengths.
100%. So what's happening next sort of 12 to 18 months in Cycler? What's the next couple of years looking like? Exciting time ahead?
We have a lot of exciting projects on at the moment. So we're doubling down on how we deal with our existing customers by looking on how we can provide loads more value. In the electronic supply chain, you can look at everything from manufacturing, assembly, box build, sourcing, and it's how we can do that best as Cyclops Group. We're doing that by looking at things like our ERP systems. Because we've been acquisitive and bought several companies, that's got slightly more complicated on our back end, but we're looking on how we can do that even better. We're looking at new markets, and I would never say never about any more companies we would look at on the horizon either.
And what's the best way to contact you, David? Just LinkedIn, email? What's easiest?
Yeah, best way is LinkedIn. Hit me up. I'm pretty much always on there. I'm quite active. So yeah, feel free to drop me a line.
And thank you massively today, because look, I've really enjoyed it. There's loads of little takeaways from this, but I guess the big one for me, it's what I've been really impressed with, which I think a lot of people will take from, is having the courage, firstly, to take yourself outside of your comfort zone and understand for your career that you needed to learn X, Y, and Z before you came back to do something which ultimately is obviously what you're always chosen to do. But without that experience, you wouldn't be the leader you are today. You mentioned the chap who was a great manager for you. You wouldn't have experienced being under his leadership if it wasn't for you taking those steps. And I think that's important sometimes, that sometimes you have to take those risks, because ultimately, you'll be better off for doing so. And I think the other part for me is that communication piece, because I completely agree. I think the age-old thing, people leave companies because of bad managers. They do, but they leave companies because there's no transparency, there's no communication. We saw that over COVID. We saw the people who were kept on because of furlough schemes, but as soon as they were back, they left because they had no communication from their business whatsoever in that time. And that was a key point where it was an acid test for how companies dealt with difficult situations and how well they thought of their employees. And I think good companies like yours kept people up to date throughout the process and keep people up to date with what's happening, because otherwise it leads to anxiety and often whisperings that come to nothing. So I think that'll be a real lesson for people listening to get a grip of that, get a grip of what's happening and understand what's happening in business, understand the vision, and then communicate that out daily. It's not a quarterly thing or annual thing at an AGM. So that's been a real takeaway for me. So, but also thank you for continuing to bring awareness to the industry, not just manufacturing, but specifically electronics and everything around that, because it's an industry, again, which needs awareness and good people in it. So thank you, Dave. I've really enjoyed it. It's been great.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, mate. Thank you so much for listening or watching this episode of the Manufacturing Leaders Podcast. Please just like or subscribe. It really helps grow the show and obviously improve the industry. If you want any more information about Theo James, as I mentioned midway through the episode, please get in touch with me or the team. I would love to talk about how we can help you directly or your business. We are more than just a recruiter, and I know people say that, but it's something I'm incredibly passionate about. We are in business for much more than just a bums on seats approach. We want to help people grow. We want to help improve their lives. And ultimately, I want to work with businesses and people who share the same values as we do. And that's something I'm incredibly passionate about. So please, if that is you and you are passionate about that dream role or passionate about your people, please get in touch with me or the team. I would absolutely love to talk a bit more detail. Thank you very much. Speak soon.